Imagine, for just a second, that you are carrying around a tiny, adorable 10-pound puppy.
Oh, the best stage.
Right. You're holding this little creature in your arms. It's vulnerable. It's clumsy. Its eyes are like still trying to focus on you.
Yeah, just completely dependent on you.
Exactly. But now I want you to fast forward less than a single year. That exact same animal is now an 80 or 90-pound absolute powerhouse of dense muscle.
Which is just, I mean, the sheer biological cost of that transformation is staggering.
It really is.
From a physiological standpoint, multiplying your body mass by 8 or 9 times in roughly 300 days, it's like building a skyscraper in a week.
A skyscraper in a week? That's a wild image.
Right. The cellular activity in their body is operating at just a frantic pace.
And usually I think when we think about a puppy growing up, we just think, they eat, they sleep, they get bigger.
Yeah, like it just happens.
Like it's an automatic background process or something. But when you look at a breed that undergoes that kind of extreme rapid expansion, suddenly you realize that process is incredibly precarious.
It's highly precarious.
Like biology might be providing the raw materials, but human choices dictate the actual architecture.
Because the margin for error is razor thin here. We're talking about an animal whose physical chassis is expanding so rapidly that their neurological development and their emotional regulation and even their skeletal integrity, they're all desperately trying to keep pace with each other.
It's all connected.
It is. If one of those systems gets misaligned, the whole structure is basically compromised.
Which is our exact mission for this deep dive. Today, we are looking at a highly detailed set of sources breaking down Rottweiler puppy growth and development.
Such a fascinating set of data, too.
It really is. We are going to look at how the specific decisions you make in those first critical months, how they literally build the bones, the brain, and the emotional baseline of the adult dog you will live with for the next decade. Okay, let's unpack this, because while our source specifically focuses on Rottweilers, the biological mechanics of how rapid physical and psychological growth intertwine, they are absolutely fascinating for anyone who is even remotely curious about mammalian development.
You truly cannot separate the mind from the body here. The nervous system dictates how the physical body moves through space, right?
Right.
And then the physical limitations dictate how the brain perceives the world. So to really understand this whole process, we have to start at the neurological level.
Let's start with the brain. Because before this animal's body gets massive, their brain goes through a phase of, radical neuroplasticity.
Yeah, it's intense.
The source material refers to this as the critical socialization period, which is a very specific, fiercely brief window. It opens around 3 weeks of age and begins to firmly shut around 14 weeks.
It is a profound, fleeting moment in mammalian biology. During those 11 weeks, a puppy's brain is uniquely porous.
Like a sponge.
Yeah. Exactly like a sponge. The synapses are forming rapidly, and the brain is frantically trying to build a map of, what is normal in the environment and what is an actual threat.
Okay.
So if a puppy is exposed to a variety of everyday stimuli during this window, things like the roar of a vacuum cleaner or the rumble of street traffic, strangers wearing weird hats, having their paws handled.
Right, all those normal human world things.
Right, the brain hardwires those experiences into a category labeled basically as unremarkable.
I found the use of the word unremarkable so compelling in the text.
It's the perfect word for it.
It is.
Yeah.
Because you don't want a 90-pound apex predator to think a vacuum cleaner is exciting, and you definitely don't want them to think it's terrifying.
No, absolutely not.
You want them to think it is fundamentally boring.
And that boredom is biologically programmed. If they encounter a stimulus before that 14-week window closes, synaptic pruning ensures they carry a baseline neurological indifference to it for the rest of their lives.
Wow. But what if they miss it? What if you isolate the puppy during this time?
Then the window closes. After 14 weeks, the brain shifts from gathering data to defending the data it already has.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So the default reaction to novel stimuli suddenly becomes suspicion, fear, or reactivity.
Wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
Because when you hear a Rottweiler, you think of a guard dog. You think of an animal bred specifically for toughness and courage. I always assumed those traits were genetically baked in.
A lot of people assume that.
Right. Why do they need all this meticulous, structured hand-holding if confidence is already in their DNA?
What's fascinating here is the vital distinction the source makes between confidence and comfort.
Okay, break that down for me.
Genetics might give a dog confidence,
Mm.
which simply means they have a strong internal constitution. But confidence does not give them a contextual vocabulary for the human world.
Meaning they don't automatically know how to interpret, like, a chaotic city street or a toddler screaming on a playground.
Precisely. Confidence is the foundation, but you still have to build the house. Relying purely on natural breed confidence is a dangerous trap for new owners.
Because they just assume the dog will figure it out.
Yeah, and a genetically tough dog that hasn't been properly socialized doesn't become a coward. They often become highly reactive.
Oh, because they aren't afraid to act.
Right, they have the confidence to address a perceived threat, but they lack the socialization to realize the mailman isn't a threat in the first place.
That makes the method of socialization incredibly important then. I think a lot of people hear the word socialization and immediately picture taking an 8-week-old puppy and dropping them into a chaotic, crowded dog park to just, let them figure it out.
Which neurologically achieves the exact opposite of what you want.
Really?
The source specifically warns against what they call flooding. If you overwhelm that highly porous, developing brain with frightening or chaotic experiences, you aren't teaching them the world is safe.
You're traumatizing them.
Exactly. You are hardwiring trauma and hypervigilance into their nervous system.
So it's not a sensory overload boot camp. The source advocates for extreme quality control. Proper socialization looks like a quiet, calm walk past a construction site, but from like 2 blocks away where the noise is just a low hum.
Yes, keeping it manageable.
Right, or it looks like meeting one calm stranger who offers a treat, not being swarmed by 10 neighborhood kids. You are carefully curating the data the brain is absorbing.
You are intentionally shaping their worldview. And as that brain is rapidly mapping out its environment and building confidence, the puppy naturally wants to engage with that world.
Of course they want to explore,
They want to run, jump, and interact with the things they're learning about.
which sets up a massive biological collision course. Because the brain is ready to explore, but the physical chassis isn't built yet.
Not even close.
The transition from their psychological development to their physical reality introduces a major limitation that I suspect catches most owners completely off guard.
We really have to look at the skeletal structure here. When dealing with a rapidly expanding large breed, you are dealing with a prolonged phase of what we call open growth plates.
The skeleton under construction. In the text, it explains that the ends of their long bones aren't actually bone at all yet.
Right, they are soft.
They are made of soft, developing cartilage, the epiphyseal plates, I think it's called.
Yes, exactly.
And as the dog grows, the cells in this cartilage divide and eventually calcify into solid bone. But the timeline is staggering. These plates do not fully close and harden until the dog is anywhere from 12 to 18 months old.
Sometimes even closer to 24 months for exceptionally large males.
24 months?
Yeah. For the first year and a half of this animal's life, the joints bearing all of their weight are effectively unfinished. The cartilage is highly susceptible to mechanical stress.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the advice the source gives based on this biology completely contradicts mainstream dog culture.
It really does.
The common logic is, hey, I have a big, high-energy puppy, therefore I need to run them into the ground to tire them out. People think a tired dog is a good dog.
We hear it all the time. But forcing exercise on a skeleton in this state is catastrophic.
Catastrophic?
It is the single most destructive mistake an owner can make. Every time a young, large breed bounds down a flight of hardwood stairs, jumps out of an SUV, or goes on a forced 2-mile jog on pavement, that impact sends shockwaves directly into that soft, dividing cartilage.
And it causes microfractures, right? The source notes you might not even see the puppy limping that afternoon, which is what makes it so deceptive.
The damage is cumulative and invisible at first. You are physically crushing the cells that are supposed to form the smooth, articular surface of the joint.
Oh, wow.
By the time the dog is 5 or 6 years old, that early microtrauma manifests as severe osteoarthritis, hip dysplasia, or elbow dysplasia. You are literally borrowing against their healthy adult years to buy a couple of hours of peace and quiet today.
That is sobering. I was doing the math on the specific exercise guidelines the source provides, and it completely reframed my understanding of canine biology.
The guidelines are very strict.
The strict rule of thumb is roughly 5 minutes of structured walking per month of age.
It is remarkably conservative.
Extremely. I mean, a 4-month-old Rottweiler puppy is a dense, energetic little 40-pound tank, and the biological recommendation is a maximum of 20 minutes of structured, repetitive walking. Not a hike, Just a walk
Meanwhile, you see people taking dogs that age on massive weekend treks.
all the time.
The distinction the text makes, though, is between forced, repetitive movement and self-directed free play.
Okay, what's the difference?
Putting the dog on a leash and forcing them to maintain a constant pace on concrete is repetitive impact. However, letting them romp around on soft grass in a backyard where they can stop, sniff, lay down, and control their own output.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that is perfectly safe and necessary for muscle development.
I see the logic, but practically speaking, if you are sitting in your living room with a giant puppy who is just bursting with energy and you know you can only walk them for 20 minutes, how does the math work?
It seems impossible, right?
Yeah. Where's the rest of the energy go? Because initially I assumed you'd just have a destructive terror on your hands.
Well, the energy equation only balances out when you factor in the massive invisible energy sink of mammalian development, which is sleep.
The hidden work of rest. The number the source reveals is staggering. A growing, large breed puppy biologically requires between 18 to 20 hours of sleep and rest every single 24-hour cycle.
They're essentially only awake for 4 to 6 hours a day.
That's it.
That's it. And the biology behind why is fascinating. We talked earlier about the sheer cost of multiplying body mass by 8 times in a year.
Building the skyscraper.
Right, building bone density, generating new muscle tissue, and processing all that sensory input from socialization. None of that happens while the puppy is awake and chasing a ball.
The physical growth happens when they are powered down.
Exactly. Sleep is when cellular repair and regeneration peak. It is also when memory consolidation occurs.
Oh, like with the vacuum cleaner?
Yes. When the puppy encounters a harmless vacuum cleaner during the day, it is during REM sleep that the hippocampus transfers that experience into long-term memory, cementing that unremarkable categorization we discussed.
Wow.
If they are awake, they are burning ATP, cellular energy. If they are asleep, they are building the adult dog.
This completely explains a behavioral phenomenon the source highlights, which I think anyone who has ever owned a dog will recognize. The evening land shark phase.
Oh, yes, the land shark.
It's that time around 7 p.m. when the puppy suddenly becomes incredibly cranky, highly agitated, and starts aggressively biting your ankles or hands. We tend to anthropomorphize this and think, wow, my dog is being stubborn or dominant, or they have a behavioral issue.
But looking at the neurology is just a biological failure state.
It is identical to the mechanism behind a human toddler having a total meltdown in a grocery store because they skipped their afternoon nap.
It's the exact same thing. When you miss that sleep, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, it essentially shuts down.
And when the prefrontal cortex goes offline,
The amygdala and the more primitive instinctual parts of the brain take over. For a dog, those primitive instincts often manifest as prey, drive, and biting.
so they literally can't help it.
They lack the neurological bandwidth to regulate their own arousal. They aren't misbehaving, their brain is simply out of battery, and they don't know how to plug themselves in.
Which is why the text emphasizes that you cannot rely on the puppy to self-regulate. You have to enforce the rest. And this is where crate training is positioned not just as a convenience, but as a critical developmental tool. The crate acts as a sensory deprivation chamber to force the brain to power down.
But the caveat is crucial here. The crate must be a sanctuary, never a prison or a punishment. By tying crate time to a predictable daily routine of eating, resting, and potty breaks, you are working with their biological rhythms. You are giving their nervous system a reliable off switch.
Let's follow that thread regarding impulse control and biting, actually, because the source dedicates significant time to this. A sleepy puppy nipping your ankle is annoying, but we're talking about an animal that will eventually possess immense jaw strength.
Oh, absolutely.
A full-grown Rottweiler has a bite force that demands absolute respect. So how do you safely manage the transition from tiny, sharp puppy teeth to adult hardware?
This is the concept of bite inhibition, and it is a fascinating look at social learning. The dog must learn to consciously control the force of its own jaw. Interestingly, this education begins neurologically before the human even enters the picture.
The littermates start the programming.
Yes.
When puppies are rolling around and playing in the whelping box, they bite each other constantly. If puppy A bites puppy B too hard, puppy B lets out a sharp yelp and instantly stops playing.
It is immediate binary feedback. The biting puppy learns that excessive force terminates the social interaction. However, once the puppy leaves the litter, The human must take over that role.
You become the surrogate littermate, and you have to finish installing that
Yeah,
software.
basically, yeah.
And the mechanism the source provides for humans to do this is remarkably simple, though it requires, strict consistency. When you are playing with the puppy and their teeth make hard contact with your skin, you don't smack them, you don't yell, you don't try to physically dominate them.
No, none of that.
You simply mimic the littermate. You go completely rigid, say ouch or no, and withdraw all attention for a few seconds. You remove the social reward.
Because you are leveraging their innate desire to engage. Over weeks of this consistent cause and effect feedback, you create what trainers call a soft mouth.
A soft mouth, I
Yeah.
like that.
You are building muscle memory. The dog's brain wires itself to inherently temper jaw pressure when interacting with human skin. So, a year later, when they are playing with a heavy rope toy and accidentally catch your hand, their jaw automatically inhibits its own force before doing damage.
So what does this all mean? When we look at this broader philosophy, managing the socialization window through calm exposure, respecting the skeletal limits, enforcing biological sleep, and teaching bite inhibition through the withdrawal of attention rather than the application of pain.
That's all connected.
The text firmly roots all of this in pure positive reinforcement. It explicitly warns that fear-based or dominance-based training is fundamentally incompatible with large, powerful breeds.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally deconstructs the myth of the alpha dog.
Oh, let's talk about that.
People often speak admiringly of the emotional stability of a well-bred Rottweiler, the unflappable, calm giant. The central thesis of this developmental roadmap is that emotional stability is actively constructed through trust.
Because neurologically, fear makes an animal unpredictable.
Exactly. When you use physical corrections or intimidation, you are continually activating the dog's sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight response.
Which is the last thing you want in a 90-pound dog.
You might get immediate compliance, but you are creating a dog that obeys out of anxiety. And physically speaking, you cannot safely overpower a 90-pound wall of muscle if they decide to fight back.
Right.
You need that animal to cooperate because they actively want to. Positive reinforcement builds a dog that views you as a safe, rewarding partner. They defer to your guidance because you have spent a year proving that your decisions lead to positive outcomes.
Trust makes them stable. And that trust pays off the most when you have to subject the dog to the invasive, uncomfortable realities of pet ownership. Which brings us to the final pillar of this early developmental phase, the medical foundation. The vet visits.
Veterinary care during this extreme growth phase is highly delicate, and the source emphasizes that standard, one-size-fits-all timelines can be ineffective.
The section on immunology really surprised me, honestly. I assumed puppies just got a standard cocktail of shots at set weeks.
A lot of people do.
But the text states that core vaccines and parasite prevention must be tailored by a vet to the individual dog, specifically because of maternal antibodies.
The biology of passive immunity is tricky. A puppy receives a massive dose of antibodies from the mother's milk right after birth.
Okay.
Those maternal antibodies circulate in the puppy's bloodstream, fighting off disease. However, as long as those maternal antibodies are present, they will actually attack and neutralize any vaccine you try to give the puppy.
Wait, really? They render the vaccine useless?
Completely useless.
So it's a timing game? The maternal antibodies slowly degrade over the first few months, and you have to time the vaccinations to perfectly overlap with that drop-off, or the puppy is left exposed.
Exactly. Vets often have to adjust the schedule based on when they suspect the maternal immunity is waning, ensuring the puppy's own immune system takes over seamlessly.
And during these vet visits, they are hyper-monitoring the dog's weight, which circles right back to the skeleton under construction. The source is adamant. Bigger and faster is not better.
Rapid weight gain in a large breed puppy is a medical emergency for those soft growth plates.
A medical emergency.
Yes, the goal is a slow, lean, highly supported growth curve. If they pack on mass before the cartilage calcifies, the skeletal frame simply buckles under the load.
The source also drops a highly practical, almost psychological tip regarding medical care, which is dental hygiene. It notes that it is infinitely easier to introduce a toothbrush to a 12-week-old puppy who thinks everything is a novel game than to try and pry open the jaws of a stubborn 90-pound adult who has never seen a toothbrush in their life.
Oh, without a doubt. It's the critical socialization window applied to medicine.
Makes perfect sense.
If you make the feeling of a toothbrush or the pinching of nail clippers unremarkable during those first 14 weeks, you save yourself a decade of wrestling matches and sedation bills.
But with all this pressure to monitor their bones, their brain, and their weight, how does a new owner know when to actually worry? Puppies are weird. They sleep in funny positions, they trip over their own paws, they occasionally skip meals.
The expert filter provided in the text for when to actually call the vet comes down to observing patterns. The keyword is persistent.
Persistent. So you're looking for persistent changes, not isolated events.
Because a puppy's body is changing so rapidly, physiological blips are normal. A brief limp after a clumsy fall, or a slightly reduced appetite the day after a big growth spurt, these are expected.
Right.
But an ongoing limp that lasts for 48 hours, a prolonged lethargy, or a persistent break in their normal routine, that is the trigger to involve the veterinarian. You manage the anxiety of raising them by tracking trends, not moments.
Taking a step back and looking at this entire developmental map, we started this deep dive holding a clumsy 10-pound pup with an unfocused brain and soft cartilage.
Hard to believe it's the same animal.
And a year later, we end up with a massive, emotionally regulated, structurally sound adult. What becomes incredibly clear from the biology is that every single step of that transition requires immense human foresight. From carefully curating exposures during that 11-week brain plasticity window, to protecting vulnerable growth plates for 18 months, to enforcing restorative sleep, to building a soft mouth through social feedback, absolutely none of it happens by accident.
This raises an important question, really.
Yeah.
When you look at the sheer density of the physiological and psychological interventions required, if a dog's emotional baseline, their joint health, and their neurological worldview are almost entirely constructed by the environment their human provides in that first year, well, then a dog isn't just a pet, is it?
What are they then?
They are a living, breathing mirror. They are a biological reflection of their owner's patience, their commitment to routine, and their emotional regulation. When we see a beautifully well-adjusted, confident, healthy, large breed dog walking calmly down a busy street, we aren't just looking at the result of good genetics. We are actually looking at a walking monument to a human's early dedication.
A monument to early dedication. That is perfectly said. Because that 90-pound powerhouse walking politely on a leash next to you is the exact architecture you built from the blueprint of that 10-pound puppy.
Exactly.
Well, that is all for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us and exploring the fascinating biological mechanics of growth and development. Keep questioning the world around you, keep exploring the science behind the everyday, and as always, keep learning.